Hey everybody, welcome to All the Fanfare. I'm Eric Pierce. Today we're talking about Hacks, a comedy on HBO that explores I'd say it's a trailblazing comedy actually, because it explores, while being hilarious, it explores concepts like misogyny, ageism, generational and sexual identity clashes. The writing is brilliant and I love it. Season 3 recently finished. And I did say we're talking about because I'm joined by my friend Sheila Moeschen. She's a writer, photographer, a funny person. And pertinent to our discussion today, she's also the author of The League of Extraordinarily Funny Women 50 Trailblazers of Comedy. Sheila, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here because you're the perfect person to talk about this. Once I finished Hex, this recent season, I wanted to talk to you about it because I think you have a very specific point of view when it comes to this topic, funny women.
Mm.
And I guess I'd like to begin there. Would you consider Hacks, all three seasons as a whole, would you consider it the best show about comedy, comedians, and if so, why? Or if not, why not?
Show your work, right? um, yeah, I think it is. I think it is definitely one of the most like fully formed and sort of well thought out and nuanced and complicated shows about right comedy and comedians, entertainment industry, and it's very very funny. One of the things I think that becomes kind of tricky when you're dealing, especially with comedy, is that like a movie or a show or something, like it tends to, the potential is there to like leach out like the funny and the joy of humor and of comedy. But this is a show that is written, I mean, very funny. The characters are very funny. The writing is so sharp, and so great. And but you also do get a really appreciation and insight into the business of comedy, the work of comedy, of why people are drawn to it as audience members, but also why people are drawn to it to make it part of their lives, their professions. The characters all feel very, very real. And very relatable, even as they are, the main character, Deborah Vance. She is sort of a Joan Rivers type figure, but also very different from that. But she has many decades in the business and has earned her stripes over and over and everything. But yet, the show really humanizes and makes her relatable as another woman trying to move forward in a business, move forward in a career, an entertainment career. And the entertainment industry is definitely not always kind to women. So the things that she
Yep.
encounters as the show begins, like you really you can relate to her very easily. And so that's one of the things that's remarkable about the show, I think.
I think it is interesting because while the show is deeply funny, it focuses on very serious and meaty topics. You talked about, no, you touched on just in your talking there about Deborah Vance, played by Jean Smart. Phenomenal performance, and she's a very complicated character. She's both the protagonist and at times the antagonist. She's the hero and the villain. She has
Mm.
moments where you are fully on her side, and then where you're just like, I don't even recognize you because it's almost a commentary on um, what the things that women have to do in entertainment because there are so few uh, slots available to women performers. The few that survive have gotten there by clawing and scratching, and Deborah is a product of that. She's had trauma in her past with her relationship with her husband and her sister, and all that's fed into who she is when the show starts. She's this deeply flawed, very funny woman um, who is at the top, but is has left a slew of bodies in her wake to get there. And kind of despite that, and what's so interesting about the show is her the other side of the equation, Ava Daniels, the young Gen Z writer who is sort of forced to work with Deborah at first, and then the show is about exploring their relationship. Ava's kind of the foil to her, and it's interesting because Deborah is both a cautionary tale of what could happen from decades in this business, but also is a beacon of what is really possible. So it's interesting. The show plays in that area, and again, I said Deborah is just brilliant, and there's you in one episode I'll go from loving her to despising her because she makes life difficult for people around her.
Yeah. And I feel like like it's like she can't help herself, I think, in some ways, because she's been accustomed to a certain amount of privilege that comes with her status as a comedian, as the kind of comedian that she has become, and she's also
Mm-hmm.
lonely. I mean, loneliness is sort of another kind of theme that ebbs and flows throughout the three seasons, and it is, in a way, it is that like you have everything, and but yet there's fundamental things that she doesn't have, like a really good relationship with her daughter. She has a broken relationship with her sister, right? Like, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
she pulls people in, but she pushes them away, she self-sabotages, so from the jump, you can kind of see this really complicated and fraught psychology going on. And then it's lived within a persona that is supposed to be on all the time, and that is part of what drives her, is that she is sort of on all the time. She is the Deborah Vance wherever she goes. And we don't really know who the real Deborah Vance is until the episodes kind of start to roll out and we
Mm-hmm.
start to get to see more of those layers kind of shed. And it's Ava who breaks that down. And Deborah, I think, does the same for Ava in certain respects. So they're they have almost immediately, they kind of form this codependent bond, and neither of them like it, and neither of them want to admit it. But the one of the moments I think that sort of crystallizes very early, which is really smart, I think the show does, is that, as you said, Ava, she sends a tweet that's a very offensive bad tweet, and she gets canceled, like in quotes, like her world is over, no one wants to work with her, and she goes to her manager Jimmy, who is also Deborah's manager, and she's like, find me work, find me anything, and he's like, I barely have anything, but I think you would work really well with Deborah Vance, and she's like, Deborah Vance, who hawks stuff on QVC and who was like a hot name in like 1987, she's so dismissive. And they have this meeting and it's contentious, and they both pull no punches. Ava is basically like, F you, you're washed up. And Deborah's basically like, F you, you're young, you don't know anything. But what happens is Ava calls her out on a joke that Deborah made, or that Ava made. She's like, what was the joke that got you canceled? And Ava tells her. And and then they have this conversation where basically Deborah is like, figures out how to make the joke better. And and Ava leaves, she drives away, she's angry, and
Yes.
Deborah like chases her down in in the car to tell her like, no, this is how the joke should play or whatever. And like, that's made me that I was on board when the show started, but that made me fall in love with the show, because I thought, here are two women who are, again, very driven, very alpha in their own way. But what hooked me was like,
Mm-hmm.
they're into the work, they're into the craft, like, I know this is true of most artists,
Yes.
but I especially know this to be true of comedians who will refine and work to find the right word to say in their line or in their set. I've heard that
Hmm.
about Jerry Seinfeld, who like will completely just continue to polish and polish. I read that the comedian Taylor Tomlinson, that she had a joke where she did it like 6, 8, almost 12 times. And every time she tweaked, it was like either a word or a phrase. And it was a very specific joke that she had, I think, about being dating or something like that. But she worked it to find just that right one. And she did. It got the strongest laugh. And that's how she kept it, And so a lot of comedians are like that, are just like, I don't consider it obsessive. I consider it like conscientious and like careful and like committed into the work. And so you see that immediately from both women. And for me, I was like, I bought in. I thought Ava's obnoxious, Deborah's obnoxious, but it's like they need each other so badly. And of course, you get like the comic tension of sort of the oil and water, and there's lots and lots of ways they keep bumping up against each other, even as their relationship grows. But that initially, yeah, I thought that's a genius moment of writing, is to not to have it be like, well, I'm stuck with you, so I'll make the best of it. It's they both recognize the work and the craft and what they want to bring to that as people doing work in the humor industry. And that's what I think bonds them immediately too, for better or for worse. So I that's to me what is another marker of why this show is superior, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think talking about that initial scene, the meet, we'll call it the meet cute, when they first meet each other. There's Ava lights into her, and I think there's a moment, I believe she says something about on her way out she was going to leave a stool sample on Deborah's lawn, and Deborah
Right.
laughs, and that's the moment when everything changes, because she's like, okay, this she made me laugh, and that's like the ultimate compliment for Deborah. And later on in season one, she has this great quote where she's talking to uh, a reporter and says something like, when you share a sense of humor with someone, it's like you speak your own private language. And it's almost like there's nothing better than that. And that scene was almost her seeing Ava as that they have that bond. And granted, their story has a long way to go. That's just the beginning of it. Um, But something you said, and I did want to key on, because you talked about how a lot of comedians in writing comedy, they're constantly in search of the perfect word, because a joke could land flat or could kill, and that turns just based on your word choice. And the show, one of the things I love about the show is we kind of are seeing behind the scenes and how comedy is done, because a lot of it is Deborah and Ava throwing words back and forth. Does this joke land funnier if it ends with there's one about toilet. I can't remember now. It's toilet and something else. But basically, Deborah's like, which is funnier? And um, there's a lot of that riffing, and you kind of can see, saw how the sausage is made, which is always kind of fascinating, and especially I think for creative acts. A lot of times you see the finished product, and you're like, wow, that's great. That person's super talented, and you kind of just take it as an assumption that this arises out of their talent, and you kind of overlook the work that goes into it because you only see the finished product. And you see them in comedy, they've probably told the joke hundreds of times, so it's very polished at that point. um, what some of the things I really enjoy about this show is how it kind of pulls back the curtain, shows us the creativity involved with comedy, shows us also there's two sides to it, I guess. There's the both of these women are driven. They both have strong work ethics, but then that easily bleeds into workaholism. They both have um, DJ, Deborah's daughter, basically accuses her of being addicted to it, and because she's right, like Deborah is addicted to comedy. She's addicted to the rush of comedy, the rush of the crowd, and actually the craft of it. Ava has the same problems, and that's kind of what unites them. They are very much the same person. They're both driven women who have completely messed up personal lives. Like they're both of them coming into this show, and through most of the show, they don't really have uh, strong relationships with any of their family, and which is partly why I think they, in addition to sharing their sense of humor, they gravitate towards one another. And what the show does so masterfully is it plays with our emotions because you can see how these two fit together like pieces of a puzzle and how they kind of scratch each other's itch and why they are so perfect together. But then the things that make them them keep will always push them apart. Deborah's ambition will always come first, and to the point where her relationship with Ava at points becomes a bit abusive because she'll choose the job over Ava every time. And Ava, on the other hand, is almost looking at Deborah as a surrogate mother. She's looking at her as a mentor, someone that she legitimately loves, and she continually gets hurt by her.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this is, just we're just starting to tap into this show right now. But it's strains like this. It's stuff that the show is structured around, and there's just richness to the characters and to the conflicts that, like, I could frankly watch like 7 or 8 seasons of this show because they keep finding ways to surprise me. And like, even though every season I want it to end with these two being best friends forever, and
Mhm.
Ava, them always being like the dynamic duo. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but it feels like it could happen, which keeps me coming back.
Yeah, and I think that something else, well, just what you were saying just now in terms of like that I so when I was watching this, I've been struggling a bit with like the idea of like the workaholic thing, or the like they're so driven to the exclusion of their relationships and like their health and everything, or at least Ava, for the, she's got that young, like, I can live off gummy bears and like kombucha or whatever. So um but it's like but so it's an interesting choice because like we're right now in a moment of like all of these messages of like trying to have like realistic work expectations, or like to take more time for yourself, to like not be on your on your technology like 24/7. We're too connected, like it's all of that kind of stuff, right? And so we keep telling everyone to like build in more of that time, and then you have these two women, and they're again in this specific business, and it's like, well, if you're going to take like the 3-week vacation, or you're not going to be on social or not doing things on the weekend, you're not going to make it. Like it's sort of like this, what is the cost of making it? And it seems like Deborah
Mm-hmm.
has mostly has had no problem of saying like this, the sky's the limit to what I will put in to rise up to where I want to be. And for people that maybe haven't seen the show or not following the show, the sort of the carrot that gets dangled even from season one is there was a moment where Deborah was poised to become the first network late night TV host. And this is still a nut that we just cannot crack for our incredibly funny women. And I mean like network television, right? Because there's women that have hosted late night on different streaming services and on other things, but like an NBC, a
Mm-hmm.
CBS, a Letterman, Leno, Carson, like that whole legacy continues to be male dominated and male centric and male focused. And sometimes I've been asked, like when I was doing the book that you mentioned, The League, like, why can't we get this done? Why can't we just, and like I have no idea. Like I have nobody's number on any dials that are in existence. But I do struggle I do struggle to like to understand that is like why we don't have a woman sitting in that chair. So this show creates that possibility that Deborah, she did a pilot, like she was in deep consideration for that, and it did not happen for her at that time. And then by season 3, the arc of that season is she has the chance to grab that brass ring again. And so we watch over the course of the season how she goes for it. Um, so like I look at that and I think, yeah, you sacrifice everything. You know, in her case, it's the chance also to make history of being the first woman in that chair. So like there's that added
Mm-hmm.
tier and that added pressure, you know, but yeah, in general, it does raise that uncomfortable question, like what are you willing to do to make it, you know? And I mean, that is a question that all creative and artists, I think, deeply struggle with. And I don't know, like, did you feel like that you were in a similar position watching it, or like?
Yeah, we're gonna go deep now because I think anyone who's ever attempted anything creative, writing or podcasting, or you have to, in order to create anything, you have to put yourself into it, and minimally that means you're devoting time to it. That's not time with your family or with your loved ones, or pursuing hobbies that are maybe better for your mental health. So that's the minimal cost to entry. But then it's easy to see how it's almost like success becomes your worst enemy, because once you have some success, you see what's possible, and you want to chase that thrill, and you want to, like, achievement becomes a goal unto itself. Um, and I think that with Deborah, I don't know if any success is like, obviously late night is the brass ring. It's the thing she's always wanted. And I don't know if she gets the show, though, I don't see her being necessarily totally satisfied with it. Like, she seems like someone who will always be pushing the envelope. But at the same time, I think the thing about being creative is it's very easy to lie to yourself, because when the show starts, she's in the middle of a 2000 plus performance run in Vegas. Like, she's been performing in Vegas for the last 30 years, basically just regurgitating the same jokes night after night, for 2,500 like evenings. I'm guessing it's like a Friday, Saturday night kind of situation. Um, so it's interesting how, I guess, ambition at points, it almost can go stagnant, in that you can get caught up in just repeating what works and not really pushing yourself. And that's kind of what really prompts Deborah to change is Ava. Ava's the one who's saying, "No, you're not a hack. You're a funny person. You're better than this. You have a story to tell." And that's really the running thing from the first 2 seasons, really, is Ava pushing Deborah out of her comfort zone to stop telling these cookie cutter jokes and really start being honest about what her life was like. And yeah, make it funny because you're a comedian, but actually like try and grow and change. And without Ava pushing her, like, late night never would have happened for her. So it's interesting how like being creative, it's a tough road to walk, because I think once you get over the initial fear of kind of stepping out on that ledge and exposing yourself, because any kind of creative act, and if you're going to be good at it, you have to be honest, and you have to share parts of yourself. I mean, not everything, but you have to at least be like, yeah, this is who I am. And there's things there with authenticity, versus your stage presence versus who you really are. But I think the best people that do kind of creative work, what you see on the stage is a reflection of who they really are. And I think here with Hex, that's definitely true with Deborah. But I think that with creative acts, it's very easy once you have success to just kind of settle in that mode, like, okay, this works, and this, I know this works, and this is dependable, repeatable, and I'm just going to do that, which is what Deborah's been doing for 30 years.
Mhm.
And Ava is really the impetus to say, there's something else here, there's something bigger here. And that's actually where um, a lot of the conflict comes from that. But Ava's right. And then it's interesting because Ava kind of begets all of Deborah's success, but then Deborah's ambition is such that she can't truly appreciate Ava and what she's done. I mean, she does, but at the same time, it's still always about Deborah.
Hmm. But it's also, don't you think that Deborah, she has miles on Ava, you know, she has come through different iterations of the business, of it being like women being very marginalized and not taken seriously and given like less opportunity, to women being gatekeepers, women like being in positions of power
Mm.
at networks and booking shows and all that kind of stuff. So now we're in this current moment of 2020 2020s or whatever, when where the show is. And so you've got Deborah having seen like the changes of the industry, and she has not really kept up with them per se, for because of what you said. Like, she found her niche and her Vegas show and she got very comfortable, right? She feathered her nest and she got really comfortable, and she sells things very successfully on QVC. And so she has her sort of niches that she's coasted on, right? But now she has a chance to kind of go for more, but it also means going back into this fray of where the industry is right now. And we see that come to kind of fruition in season 3, where she gets called out on some of her older, outdated material that's very racist and homophobic. It's all the ists, it's all the isms. She participates in a bunch of that kind of joke telling and joke humor that, if you grew up or any and through that time, like watching some of the stuff that they showed as her old footage, I was like, oh boy, I remember men, mostly men comedians, like saying those kinds of things, and some still being really mad that they can't say it anymore and stuff like that. But anyway, so she has to sort of reckon with this moment of difference within the industry and what that means to her craft. And Ava, I feel like Ava just wants her to get there, right? Like right away. Ava comes from a different perspective because she's so much younger. And we see that too throughout in so many funny ways, where she keeps trying to basically like lecture Deborah on like labor laws and like and like all kind, like the one of the funniest lines, and I think it was in the first season, where they're trying to work out just jokes. They're like, just like, let's start at the very basic, set up punchline. And Ava's going through and she's like, she's like, what if it was just, like scatological or sort of observational? And Deborah's like, what is that? She's like, there's no punchline. And Ava is like, oh, the punchline is so masculine. Like, it's all about the
Yes.
climax. She's like, so pretentious and obnoxious, but I fell off the couch laughing. But like, but that is her worldview. That's her perspective. Like, that is where Ava is trying to like agitate for change and all this stuff. And Deborah is sort of, she opens up to some of that, but I feel along the way she's also telling Ava, like, you also have to work within the system. Like, as you're wanting to change the system and get to the, utopic, like, let's hug everybody and everybody gets healthcare forever, that's free. You also have to like work within the parameters that you're given to try and change that. And that's what Deborah is doing to like greater or lesser degrees of success and everything. And I think that, Ava, she has some tone deafness about her, because I think she just wants Deborah to be like just woke instantly. And in the third season too, they have this like, not a serious fight, but they're in conflict or whatever. And Deborah's like, I can't be woke, I'm exhausted. She says something like that, which is also funny line and such a funny perspective and everything. So yeah, so for that, I also think the show is completely fascinating, because it shows this clash of like where we have sort of been in the comedy world, where we're at now, which in a way it's kind of like a wild west. Like, it's very exciting, but like, are some of the same systems like
Mhm.
still dragging voices down that we really want to hear from? So the show does a great way of doing that without making it sort of like preachy and politicized. It feels very honest in the way that it's asking some of the questions and stuff about like the comedy business and everything.
And part of that comes from Ava is such a good foil because that's her natural worldview. Like, she just lives it. Like like her sexuality, she makes no bones about telling everyone like what she's got going on, and it's so much a part of her identity. And then one of the great things about this show is how it kind of minds the gap between Deborah, who's a boomer, and his, like you said, has kind of been through the culture wars and has the scars to show for it, and has a certain idea about how things are done, even like, sexuality type stuff. And then Ava, who just says whatever is on her mind at any point. A lot of what the show is exploring, you can see it's definitely a mentor apprentice type of thing, where like Deborah says at one point that she sees herself in Ava. And so a lot of the lessons she gives her they're tough love lessons. I'm doing this for your own good. I know this hurts, and I know you're crying. Like, she makes Ava cry an awful lot in this show,
Yeah.
because Ava lives with her heart's on her sleeve, and she's very attached to Deborah. Like I said earlier, she kind of looks at her as a surrogate mother. I think she's got her own issues with her own mother.
Well, if I can just jump in,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, because when you said Ava wears her heart on a sleeve, I feel like that when Deborah sort of like, a friend of mine calls it like dog bite, like when someone kind of like just nips at you or whatever. I feel like Deborah is, like, she's intimidated by that because there's so much just sort of raw honesty. It is a little bit like a fire hose, and there are times when you're like, and one of the other supporting characters is Kayla, who is Jimmy, the agent. It's her like assistant, sort of growing, budding partner in business. She's sort of the same way of this, like just this unfiltered thing. And I think for somebody in Deborah's generation, at least, like I think it's intimidating for her, and I think it scares her because as we see the seasons progress, it takes a lot of teeth pulling to get Deborah to like let her armor down. And even when she does, there's a little more armor underneath that, and sort of that has, so she's like she's been real kind of locked up in her, her sort of tough exterior, her go-getter, her ambition. She It's almost like Deborah has known she can step over the line, but not too far over the line, up until the point where the show starts. She sort of knows her lane, but she wants to get out of that lane.
Hmm.
So I think that her confrontations with the younger generation and Ava specifically, I think that emotiveness, I think it intimidates her because I think she recognizes that there is power in that when it's harnessed. And that's what you were saying, like we do see that in the second season takes place over the course of a massive like tour. Deborah like goes back to her basics, and she goes and plays clubs, and she plays like state fair wherever we'll have her. She does like drop-ins, which is like basically a
Hmm.
sort of open mic or a flexible mic. And if a working comic who has a little bit more clout experience comes to that, the host or the booker or the promoter or whatever, will bump anybody who's been waiting to get on and stuff like that, which is just that's par for the course or whatever. So she plays those rooms, and so she goes she goes back to her basics and stuff. And it's through that Ava does finally get her to understand that she, like you said, she has to show more of the real, more of the true, more of the authentic Deborah, which isn't all just sort of, kind of quippy and arch, that there's pain underneath that then she uses to fuel her career and the art itself and everything like that. So I think those times, I think we see Deborah like just bristling because I think she just feels uncomfortable with Ava's like her lack of boundaries and her looseness, in that respect, because that makes her really powerful. That makes Ava really powerful in some senses. And I wonder if there are moments where Deborah has that, like, you don't get to have that power because you haven't paid your dues yet. And that's like maybe underlying some of the show itself is like a younger generation coming in and for better or for worse, the perception of the entitlement that comes with that. And I think she says to Ava at one point, like you wrote some scripts and you went to like 2 years of college or 1 year of college, and you wrote some tweets or something. Like, you have no idea, you haven't really earned your stripes yet. And so I think she also wants to kind of like keep her in check. You're right. It's such a strange relationship that you're rooting for them, but then you're also like, this is just, this is bad. Like, this breaks
Hmm.
so many like healthy relationship frameworks and stuff like that. But it's like they do love each other so much. Like, it's like a familial love, and it's also, I think, a love of
Hmm.
two artists that are coming together, and I think an appreciation of two women coming together. And it's like, so yeah, I mean, yeah, their relationship is like, it is so well crafted, and it's only season 3, and we are going to get a season 4. So whew, I don't know, those writers, the pressure's on.
I totally agree because they keep setting the bar higher and higher. It's interesting because every season they chip away at Deborah's facade. They let Ava in a little more. You can see her character growth season by season. But at the root of it, she's still the same person, and we see that by her choices at the end of season 3. That her choosing the show over Ava is, in some ways, it feels like the ultimate betrayal. And actually, I'm kind of curious because I feel like this show has a lot of betrayals. Like, this is a comedy, but it actually gets a bit heavy at points. And one of the most painful scenes in this show has to be when Deborah makes Ava read the scandalous email that she sends to these TV producers about how awful of uh, a boss Deborah is, and all these awful things she's done to Ava. Ava only writes the email because Deborah hurt her again, and so she lashed out the only way she knows how, by writing something and then later regretting it. Um, that is probably one of the hardest scenes to watch, but I almost feel like the most painful scenes are those where it feels like these two women they finally arrived. Their relationship is in a good place. They're seeing eye to eye. um, Deborah's let her guard down, and then something happens where she kind of pushes Ava away. There's this beautiful scene at the end of season 1, or maybe it's the end of season 2. Actually, it's the end of season 2. Deborah's done her big show. The network wants it, and they're toasting her at a big party, and she chooses to shine the light on Ava, who has refused to put her name as a co-producer, co-writer on the show, because it's Deborah's story, it's Deborah's show. Very selfless act. And in her moment of triumph, Deborah says, "I want to thank my co-writer Ava, who I couldn't have done this without." And it's a very beautiful moment. And by the way, I think it's hilarious. I noticed that Ava, during that dinner scene, this fabulous party, Ava's wearing the ugly dress that Deborah bought her, that she insisted she buy. It's just, this show has lots of these like throwaway things that like they don't even call attention to, but like if you're paying attention, you'll see them, and you're like, "Oh, that's clever, that's funny." But then after that scene, they have this really intimate moment where the two of them are standing on a balcony and talking about what's coming next. And Deborah's like, "Yeah, I'm firing you." Like, and she does it with love, but she's pushing her out of the nest because she doesn't want her career to become Ava's career. Sees bigger and better things for Ava, and it's a very selfless moment. It's maybe the most selfless thing we ever see Deborah do, because it's clear they do great work together, and Deborah's star is kind of on the rise because of a lot of what Ava's like brought to the table. So that's probably the most painful scene, I think, for me to watch, because it felt like they finally had like, we're seeing eye to eye. The relationship was like, they were in lockstep. They were going to be like the dynamic duo of comedy. And like season 3, they were just going to be taking no prisoners, and then that's not what happened.
Mhm.
I guess for you, are there more painful moments, that things that like you felt were harder to watch, and why is it that why is it, do you think, that the show is so successful at pairing like these utterly gutting moments with this the hilarity?
Hmm. Um, yeah, that is a painful moment. I didn't really like think about it as as such until you were like just describing it of like I guess because like then we sort of see like that Ava is like kind of moving forward. And I didn't know there was gonna I thought like that was it for the series, which I was kind of like, all right, like you could definitely leave it there. So
Hmm.
when there was a three, I was like, well, now that is very interesting, But yeah, that did make me like, I did feel heartbroken, and but it like that is another instance of it. Like it felt also really real that Deborah, like you said, is trying to kind of move her in a different direction. You know, I don't know if it is. I don't think it's selfless. I think Deborah has these moments where she actually sort of does the right-ish thing. She doesn't like it. Like in the season 3, she finally gets to hang out with these older male comics that were her peers, sort of like Letterman, Leno kind of whatever cohort, and they're just kind of dicks, and and she's like so disappointed, but she leaves. She kind of calls them out and she leaves and sort of torpedoes that, and it's like, and she did it for the right reasons, but she didn't
Yep.
like it, and she blames Ava and whatever. But it's funny. But yeah. So that moment, that is a hard moment to watch. It is like it's heart. It kind of broke my heart a bit, but the two scenes so far, I think, that I keep thinking about is one where Deborah makes Ava read her these nasty emails that she sent. Ava is up for a job for a show that they're sort of basing on a Deborah character, and they know that Ava has worked with her, and so they want to recruit her, and they want dirt on on Deborah to sort of build this character. And like at first she sort of is on board ish, but then she's like, no, I can't do that. And then she and Deborah have a major falling out, and she drunk contacts the producers, and she sends them all this terrible stuff that she's found out about Deborah just from being close to her and stuff. And she comes clean with Deborah in season 2 about it, and Deborah makes her read like word for word these terrible things, like Deborah will always is lonely, and she'll always be alone because she's selfish, and like just those are the worst things you could think about yourself. And Ava's crying, and Deborah's like stone faced, and it's just like it's just horrible because it's such a quiet scene too. It's like no one's yelling. Like Deborah is just she's so quiet and controlled, and that is terrifying because you're like, what is this woman capable of? How is this going to change their relationship? Like there's so many unknowns. It's uncomfortable, and it's real heart wrenching, I think, because the what Ava is saying is so blanket honest, like it is. It's like if you were just trashing like another person to another person, everything. So that scene is like, oh, that was gut wrenching to watch that. And then I think the scene near the end of season 3, then the last episode where Ava is at first brought on to be the head writer of The Late Show, and then Deborah pushes her out in a way that's dishonest. And Ava finds out about her and confronts her. And there's anger in that scene, but there's so much hurt. Like Ava is like, she's in tears, and the tierceness in her voice, and she's pleading with her because she says, like she says, I deserve this, but she also is like, we're friends, and like that's also why you take me with you. And it's like, again, that moment, it's like,
Hmm.
that whole like, how much do I care about the like, have I allowed myself to care about this person? I think Deborah is saying that, now it's like, it's become like a relationship to like tend, and like that makes her, I think, squirrely. And from Ava's just like her little ooey gooey heart, which is like, yeah, she's like, I love you. Like, I want to do this work with you. And she can't understand why Deborah's pushing her away. I know it sounds crazy because it's like we're talking about a show about a comedy show. But it's like, it's so, it's got so much depth to it, to the show itself. And so a moment like that brings that home, where you're just like, you can just feel both of the characters, I think, are heartbroken, but Ava in particular, where she's like, it's like pleading, like, don't break up with me. It's that moment that you probably, most of us have had in some relationship, where you're just like, yeah, don't go. Like, like, I'll dye my hair blonde. I'll like, I'll learn to cook a souffle. Like, what is it going to take? And it's, oh, you just feel terrible because like, your dignity is leaching out of you, but at the same time, you're like, you want what you want. So that scene is, I think, enormously well done, and it was really hard to watch. And then it turns, and it's like a thing of beauty the way that final episode ends. I think it sets it up for just another like incredible journey forward with these characters.
Yeah, I agree, and it's showing Ava's arc. She's for better or worse, she's learned the lessons that Deborah has taught her. And on one hand, that kind of makes me sad because Ava's such a fragile bird, and she's forcibly being forced to reckon with the realities of the entertainment business by someone she loves. But on the other hand, it's probably better. It's going to happen to Ava, so it's probably better if Deborah does it to her versus just some guy in a suit who will take no consideration of her feelings, and it's just a business decision. I mean, it's just a business decision for Deborah, it. But I think because of the relationship, it's a betrayal, and then, like I said, Ava, it's like she's really taking the lessons of the last couple of seasons and is putting that into motion. And so when we talk about, the season 4 that we're going to get, I'm super curious to see what the Ava of season 4 looks like. Is she more jaded? Is she more um, self-interested, or is she still the same quirky person we've always known? The person she's in it for Deborah. Like it's funny because we've talked a bit about their relationship and how it's very complicated. It's very you could say it's abusive, but these two circle each other, and they're drawn together. And specifically, Ava, she keeps leaving her girlfriend and other jobs so that she can be with Deborah because that's where she wants to be. And it's kind of interesting because Deborah has she has these people around her. You could call them her family. They're her employees, but they're basically her family. Marcus and Damien, and of course Josefina, who
Mm-hmm.
I love. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a moment in season 2 where Ava, I think it's in season 2, where Ava is finally accepted as one of the group because they recognize she's here to stay. And it almost then becomes more like a found family where, okay, she's part of the group, she's part of the entourage, but it's really a family, and it feels very warm and inviting and welcoming, and these are her people. And it's so when Deborah keeps rejecting her, it almost feels like she's kicking her out of the family. At least that's my read of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of funny too at the end of season 2. I don't know if you caught this, but so when Deborah tells Ava, I'm firing you, giving you severance, whatever, setting you free, shortly after that, we get a scene of Ava. I don't know how long it's been, but she's in her apartment watching TV on mute, and she's talking to Jimmy, and then the camera like pans around, and you see that she's watching Deborah on QVC because she just wants to see her. And by the way, Jimmy's calling to let her know Deborah is dropping the lawsuit against Ava.
Oh, that's
And
right.
Ava's actually a bit crushed because she was looking forward to seeing her. Like she was excited that she was actually going to be in her presence again, because they're so drawn together, and it feels like it's a collision kind of thing though, because every time they come together there's magic, but there's also sparks and there's pain and hurt, and it feels like part of what's so great about the show though is it feels like it's being authentic to these characters as people, because it's not going to be a cookie cutter ending. It's not going to be happy ever after. There's these people are going to be who they are, and the show is just about navigating that relationship. And yeah, like I said, at points it gets heavy, and it really does get heavy. But like, even if you're crying, like they still win you back with a laugh somehow. It's some of the best writing that I've seen in a comedy, or just even period. It's just so well done.
Yeah, I think anytime you recognize that like a film or show is centering relationships primarily, then I think you know you're in the presence of something really magical, and that's going to give you a lot to to think about or to like connect with. All the other stuff, in a way it's like window dressing, but I think if you just go through and your favorite TV shows and films and things like that, they're relationship driven always, it's a great thing that this show has been able to make that work in the context of like the entertainment world and the comedy world, because it would be a lot easier to make it about all that other stuff, but it really isn't. It really is about these just very interesting relationships. And it's great too that the show doesn't fall back on that sort of odd couple kind of dynamic, or that sort of, like an, an older mentor type thing and a younger protege. Like there's a lot of pitfalls, I think, and that um, the show could fall into. And to your point, like it speaks to the caliber of the writing and the showrunner and everything, that it avoids that like just really beautifully.
You made a great point that I'm gonna give you full credit for, because it was a brilliant. You sent me an email and it had a brilliant point that I want to throw to you, with giving you credit for it, so people know it's not my idea. But you had talked about how Deborah is positions herself as a commodity. I think it's probably by necessity to some degree, but she's always in some way selling herself. And I even think it's interesting that her daughter's name is DJ, as in Deborah Jr., as though her daughter is an extension of her brand.
Mm.
But I'm just curious. You had raised a lot of good points about kind of that that mode where she's always selling, and it's always about the brand, and whether or not that's kind of an extension of her character, or if that's just the realities of trying to succeed as an older woman in entertainment. Or I just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, first, I also thought that was brilliant. So thank you for validating my my kid. So yeah, well, I noticed that right away too, because like, because I think again, we're in a moment of like trying to resist like influencers and, like the like paid content, all this has this like ickiness to it. It didn't at one point. Now it's sort of like ick and brand and sellout, and like there's a lot of pushback of like not being a brand, and Deborah just is like leaned into it. And I get the feeling that it was something that probably developed like 10, 15 years into ago from when the show starts, that like QVC maybe was like a sort of a hot edgy place to be, and she kind of got in there, but yet she doesn't get out of it. She really like embraces that to the point of like making her house like almost an open, like people can come. There's a thing where Marcus is like the house, he develops this concept called the House of Vance, where letting like fans and things come into her space and get certain items and stuff that she's made in conjunction with QVC and everything like that. So yeah, so I think that it is. I think that's a product of her, part of like just her career development, right? Of like she's not going out touring, she's staying in Vegas. She has this residency. Then she's developed like these QVC lines, and so that's like another stream of revenue. But she just really she revels in it. And yeah, that is an interesting place to be for an entertainer and a woman who's an entertainer, because there's also that this like pushback of, women are, not to be commodified, of course, and not to be seen as that. And she doesn't mind. She doesn't mind at all. She doesn't have those same hangups, I think. Um, I think that it shows her as a very savvy businesswoman, is the bottom line to that. I think it's a sort of a counter to her as an artist and as a creator. And I think she also knows that like it is a lot of business, and it is a lot of like getting the best deal. The one of the funny thing is, I think in season 1 is she discovers that people are making stuff on Etsy with like her likeness and are sort of basically like capitalizing on her name and her career. And when she finds that out, she's outraged from an economic standpoint. She isn't like, oh, like they chose this picture to put on the candle, like where I look terrible. No, she's like, I need a cut of this. And she figures out a way, she tasks Marcus with figuring out a way to do it. So that's another part of it that I actually ended up really loving, because I thought to myself, this is a woman who knows what the business is, or knows what that business piece of it is, and she is not afraid to just like get in there and milk it for all it's worth. I think up until she and Ava collide, as you say, that she doesn't know how long she's going to get to be like wandering around on stage telling, like, oh, I burned my husband's house down, haha, like anybody got a marshmallow or whatever, like her terrible jokes. So I think she realizes like I have to make as much money and keep that going like as long as possible. And so those things came in, but I think she likes that. I think we do see that she has surrounded herself with lots of stuff. And one of her quirky things is she collects like salt and pepper shakers that are like very rare. And there's a hilarious scene where Ava is tasked to go get a rare one. And she does it. That is like an Indiana Jones moment, right? Where she's like, she has to figure out how to get the golden idol without the boulder crushing her. And and she does it. She does it, which shows Ava's like ingenuity and her her tenacity. And the line that Ava has in that moment with the shopkeeper who doesn't want to sell her the salt and pepper shaker, Ava threatens to smash this like rare vase from some like snooty McSnooterson estate, and Ava's like, he probably owned slaves. She yells like, and it's hilarious. Like that's Ava's, again, like that's her forethought, is like he was probably socially irresponsible anyway. He deserves to have his vase smashed and stuff. I think Deborah, I think she loves commodity, and I think she doesn't mind being a commodity. And I think it's also, again, smart and powerful that she is taking control of that. So I think it doesn't become kind of like icky or problematic, I think, because of that, because she's very much in control of what it is that she is selling and what it is that she has made into a brand in relation to herself. And it's a different perspective, right? I don't see Ava going on Etsy and like, eventually like marketing like her own, I don't know, brand of whatever. Like it's a bad analogy, but like I guess it points back to that kind of distinction of Deborah understanding what it takes to have longevity in that business, and Ava understanding like we just need to fix it. We need to fix the business and open the door to, all voices and all kinds and stuff like that, and figure the rest out as we go along. And Deborah is the opposite way. So yeah, all her commodity stuff, I find really interesting, and I think it's appropriate that she's based in Vegas, which has like spectacle and gaudiness and stuff and like merchandise. And I mean, you can get married by many different Elvises, right? Like it's that whole like kind of playground of just capitalism and stuff, right?
The whole QVC thing, I think when I early on in season one, when you see she's doing QVC, I guess I kind of assumed it was like, oh, she has to do QVC. Like she's been forced to do QVC because she's no longer relevant. And then you quickly discover that no, she's actually filthy rich and she doesn't need to do stand up anymore if she doesn't want to. I think that's kind of an actually interesting when you think about it that she's had enough success that she could never work again a day in her life, and she's loaded. Like she throws money around. I think my favorite thing she buys is there's a scene where they're on tour in season two, and they go into a club, and there's this misogynistic jerk who's hitting on there's another female comedian. He's hitting on her, and then he's basically putting Deborah in a spot where, in front of everybody on stage, either she has to kind of laugh off his gross jokes about her, or she calls him out and then looks like a bitch. That's basically where he's put her. And rather than play the game, Deborah steps back and explains to the audience what's happening to us and to the audience in the crowd, and then offers to write this guy a check for almost $2 million to never step on stage again. It's a great example of just, she literally throws money around in this movie. And again, clearly the reason she's pursuing stand up at this point, the reason she's pursuing the late show is less about the money. It's more about the accomplishment, the prestige maybe, but it's really about, it's chasing the dragon. It's that creativity thing where you're always trying to be better and better. But I do think it's also interesting that the show doesn't shy away from attacking and pointing out misogyny when it happens. And a lot of what the show does talk about and illustrate is kind of how Deborah is the way she is because she's been fighting these battles for 40 years. To the point where she's done underhanded things to other female comedians to get where she is. Which is part of her journey, is kind of reckoning with that and apologizing for her past sins. I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on just how you, as a woman yourself, I know you've done some stand up, but then just in general, the show, like how you feel it's approached misogyny and what it's said about the entertainment industry as a whole.
It is I forgot about that moment that you just described, but it's one of my favorite ones. When I was watching it, my jaw was on the floor of just how like the awesomeness of that whole exchange where, like you said, she lays bare exactly what is going on and exactly like why he gets to say those things he gets to say, and that it's not right, and that she's seen this like play out a million times in the course of her career and stuff. And it's she does, yeah, she throws money at the problem and makes him go away, which doesn't change the system. It doesn't change, like, make the misogyny go out of comedy and entertainment and stuff. But it sends a clear message of who has power and what they were going to do with it. And we don't know what a woman could do with all of that power because we haven't really seen that, like, really play out, like, in real life. So the fact that she just does that is is really badass and really, like, almost more satisfying than if in relation to, like, if Ava would have, like, made some speech, right? Like, tried to organize a protest against the club to get the guy fired and everything, like, which is great. But I don't know, there's something about that raw power. I think that that is what made that moment really exciting. I think the show does an interesting job um of showing, like, how much Deborah has had to deal with and the stuff she's had to navigate, like you said, the channels and everything for both, like, men and women. Like, she has done underhanded things just to get ahead, and it really didn't matter if she was stepping on a woman or a man. Like, she's done what she has done and everything. But she's very much still embroiled in that. Like, so no matter how far you go, like you're always gonna meet that jerk, like, and that's what that scene is about, right? Like, it doesn't matter if he's the head of NBC or if he is the host of Thursday night Mike at whatever club in whatever city. Like, that figure is always going to be there. So that's not great, but yet there's something about all that that's not as depressing to me as it might be in done other ways. And maybe it's because you see Deborah, like, she keeps advancing, you know, he keeps advancing kind of no matter what. And with that recognition of, like, there's always going to be that jerk, in power, that's going to want to close that door to you. And what are you going to do about it? I think that's the question that it really asks. It's not trying to sort of solve anything. It's recognizing, like, this is a historical systemic issue that's baked into entertainment and it's baked into comedy. What are we going to do about it? And the answer is clearly, like, not just one thing. I think the answer is, like, maybe you pay it to go away. Maybe you organize the protest, maybe you start your own network, I don't know. I mean, yeah, right. Like, that's also, gratifying to me, is that that doesn't feel, like, kind of faked or politicized. It just feels like we recognize this is always going to be a thing, and so what are you going to do about it? And Deborah, because it has the show itself is situated as like as a, like you said, it's not really like a sitcom, but it's kind of it's a dramedy. Watching Deborah strategize how to get around those usually men in this case it is very funny, because the things she does tend to be, like, more creative and stuff. But I guess she's earned that. She has the power, she has the clout, she has the influence, she has the name, so she can afford to take risks and get past those gatekeepers in her very own way. I do want to just say, along those lines, I do like that how a lot of the people so far that we have seen in power roles in the show that are men, they're not, like, so gross and reprehensible and, like, that you're like, this guy should be in jail kind of thing. Like, um, Jimmy, the agent, is a character that his evolution I've just loved, like, as he has sort of, like, taken on a little bit more um, screen time or whatever, and narrative time. And what I love about him is he really cares. Like, I think that there's a stereotype of people in the industry, managers and agents and publicists and stuff, that are also ruthless and heartless and soulless and everything. And Jimmy cares so much. Like, he does. He cares about his clients to the point where, when the big agency that he's within, they want to get rid of they want to cut ties with Deborah. They're like, she is washed up and she's never going to be what you think she's going to be. And he leaves over that. He stays loyal to her, but he also sees the potential. And it's him that sees the potential of matching Ava with her, or at least throwing Ava into the lion's den. But I get the sense that he reads people. Yeah, he sees that, and so at the end, season 3, part of the maneuvering to get Deborah into that late night chair involves getting the person who's up for that job out. And they do it. Jimmy and Kayla team up to they go visit the grandson of Fatty Arbuckle. Fatty Arbuckle is a very famous comedian in the 20s. and and there's been a rumor of, like, there's going to be or a biopic about him, and the guy who's tapped to be the late night host, that's like a dream screenplay for him to do. And so they understand that the grandson holds the rights to the story, and so they go and visit him. And the grandson is played by Christopher Lloyd, who is like national treasure. Okay, Doc Brown, national treasure. Jim from Taxi. I'm still of an era where I watched Taxi reruns, so I know that character. Um, and he just is he steals like the scenes that he's in and everything, but he it could come off as this like he's eccentric and weird, and he's written the screenplay that is also like pretty weird, but Jimmy reads it and he reads it in a real way. Like he takes the time with it and he sees the potential in it, and he's like, I want to make this movie, and I we can make the script. And like it was my heart was in my throat during that, because I was like, oh, please don't let anybody be a jerk to anyone, like please don't let Jimmy like, sort of snow him to get what he wants, cuz like so far we haven't seen Jimmy do any, kind of ugly maneuvers. He's been pretty much above board. He has a lot of integrity. I guess that's what I'm saying. He has a lot of integrity and a lot of heart and sensitivity, and I love that. And so I wonder if maybe the show is like, kind of positioning him as like, this is how power can look in a man or a woman. In this case, it's a man, right? Is that somebody who is like, who wants to build and support and create and not like just tear everything down and be out for themselves and stuff. It's interesting. And maybe I'll ask you this, if you found this, was in the very first episode, we do get a glimpse of like Ava's kind of her what do you call it? Like sort of deviousness. That's not the right word, but we learn that she has sort of like stepped over some people already in the industry, to either get what she wants, or she's like, yeah, she's been like, I'm not going to work with you. You're not anything, kind of. She has that bad, that's a bad attitude. And I feel like almost very quickly we see how like just gross that is, like the show, by kind of introducing these other characters and the way they work, it almost is like Ava doesn't necessarily need to be like put back on her heels, even though she is. But it's almost like we don't need any like super ugly confrontation, or kind of, like, oh, I wish I hadn't, screwed that person over kind of thing, because I feel like the show is modeling like how you could do business, or how you could get ahead. And it not necessarily has to be underhanded and like gross, So I don't know if you found that same thing of like Jimmy almost being like a sort of moral, kind of ethical foil, where he's willing to kind of go through like more above board channels, in different ways to advance things.
Yeah, Jimmy is almost like, it's weird because he's not one of the main characters, but in some ways he's almost the heart of the show, because he's like the most pure person. He's not damaged goods. He's not like ambitious for ambitious sake. He's just a pure person, and he wants the best for the people that he's a manager, so he wants the best for his clients. To the point where he has his Jerry Maguire moment where he just walks out of his prestigious firm because he believes in his one client, and he's going to leave with that one client, and then his secretary leaves with him. So, yeah, Jerry Maguire moment. But
That's right.
the other thing you were hitting on too that I think is interesting, we were talking about misogyny. I think all of the male characters that get any significant screen time they're feminists. Even the guy that owns the Palmetto, who's kind of like Deborah's on again, off again,
Mhm.
Bo. He has some troubling behavior in that he seems to like younger women, but he at the same time, every time you see him with Deborah, there's nothing but love and respect and admiration between them. Um, it is interesting how, even though misogyny is circling the show, like all the men in the show are almost like positive examples of male behavior for the most part. I mean, there's some stuff that you're like, yeah, I don't know about that, but they're all characters you can root for, and even Doc Brown, who is just like cluelessly, casually misogynistic. Like, I didn't know women could drive.
He's like,
it's
what about that? Like,
it's perfect, and it's like, like I can't even be offended by it because he's so lovably harmless about it that it's just funny. And it's interesting that because all this this is a male dominated industry, and that is kind of that's the monster under the bed. That's kind of what's the pulling the levers on a lot of the things that Deborah does is because of this. And even I guess kind of like the ultimate betrayal, like when she chooses not to make Ava her
Mhm.
head writer, she chooses an old dude, and which is maybe, she's playing the game at that point, but that's another move towards, it's a misogynistic decision that she makes because she feels like it's best for her career. I don't know. I think you hit on something there when you just started talking about the men in the show and how the ones that are given screen time are good examples of male behavior and how we can support women in these, in these kinds of in an entertainment business. It doesn't have to be a boys club.
I think to close that out, I think we sort of see, I think, a realistic worldview of like some things have gotten better, some things are, need to get better. And that whole comes back to that whole thing of kind of working within the system. And I think that's like what we're seeing is that the some of the men I think that are realizing like that they like the owner of the
Hmm.
Palmetto, he is set to marry someone who is closer to his age and a little more like appropriate. And so it's kind of that like some things need to change, and if they can, and then some things are not going to, like the colonoscopy crew.
Hmm.
Of like they're clearly not interested in being woke or whatever. And I think that's encapsulated, like you were saying, there's lots of these little moments that you sort of almost like overlook, but they're kind of jam packed. And one of those for me is when they're at that country club trying to schmooze and stuff. And Deborah and Ava are having breakfast. And then Deborah's like, let's go. And Ava's like, well, I want more coffee. And Deborah explains to her that the server is not going to make as much tips if she doesn't turn the table over. Cause she's like, you've obviously never worked like at a serving, in a hospitality job. And then
Hmm.
Ava is of course horrified because she's, trying to be, completely correct in all of her social justice and her social views and stuff like that. But that's one of those moments where like both are right. You know what I mean? It's like well, the server deserves to get paid a living wage no matter what. But the reality is it's set up like this. So we can help her by getting out of here so that she can turn the table over. So there's also like I think a constant like the sort of education that's going on around, like you said. I like how you phrase it like that the misogyny is like circling. And I think there are other of those bigger issues that they are constantly circling the characters and the storylines. And and you can't resolve it because that's not real. Like you can't just unfortunately you can't pay the $1.69 million and make it go away, but instead we can kind of like we have these
Hmm.
moments of insight and learning and stuff like that. And it's done in a way that doesn't make it feel like after school special preachy and stuff. So smartly baked into the storylines and the characters. Oh, so good. It's so good.
It's such a good show. That might be a good point to end on, unless you had anything else you wanted to throw in.
Um,
Anything we didn't touch on.
I don't think so. I mean, we talked about tons and tons. So, the show is tremendous in the world it portrays and the characters, of course. And also, yeah, if you appreciate that, like that's just smart writing. It was great that you asked me to be on this because I went through and I rewatched all three seasons, and I took like notes while I was watching. And part of the fun of that was to capture some of those like just great lines and great exchanges and stuff. And it just made me really appreciate like the writing of it. You know what I mean? Like how beautifully crafted so many of the lines and stuff are, and thoughtful. And yeah, it really is. It's a show that like it just packs a punch. um I don't know, do you have like thoughts, predictions for season 4? Do you think like it's going to be season 4 and that's it, or
I hope it's not just season 4. I hope it's like a six season show kind of thing. granted, I will be heartbroken if they continue to just pull us, just pull on our heartstrings and tease us that these two are going to finally, get on the same page for another 3 seasons. But at the same time, the show is so good because it's being realistic about, I think, how much someone will change, especially. I think Deborah's like 70 or something in the season 3, so I don't think she's going to undergo a ton of character change. I think it's unrealistic to expect that. Most people in their 70s aren't like doing a 180 on their personality. So I think she is who she is. And so I think that tension's always going to be there about these two characters. And that's honestly is a lot of what the show is about and why I love it. On top of the fact that it's hilarious and heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. Predictions for season 4. I'm curious to see what happens with the Marcus character since he's kind of stepping away from running the Enterprise. I really want to see. I am glad that we're getting to see Deborah's late night show. So this was set up in season 1, where this was the one that got away. She was going to be a late night host, and it's heartbreaking to see that pilot episode about what could have happened and never does. And then 40 years later, she's getting another shot at it. And then in season 3, we had she did the guest host, which was a great episode. And you could see like she would kill at this. So I hope we get lots of that. I know there's going to be, because I've seen 3 seasons of this show, I know there's going to be conflict, and Ava's probably going to do something half cocked because that's who she is. And but at the same time, at this point, these two, they're in each other's lives for better or worse. And um, Deborah is no longer trying to push Ava away, and Ava has decided, yes, this is where I'm going to be. I don't have any plot predictions per se. I just know that's going to make me laugh. It's probably going to make me cry, and I'm going to be excited to see it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be real interesting, the late night ride, because now the stakes are really high for Ava because it's her dream job and it's the head writer, so there's all that responsibility. She has gotten herself into it in a way that is like a cowboy standoff with Deborah almost, right? So like you said, the chances of it going sideways are just enormous. So I'm already sort of like have like, pit sweat over what is, like you said, how's she going to kind of push. Um and yeah, because Ava's whole thing is like, now we're in the driver's seat, so we have a chance to do something really different and not just the same old, white guy at a desk kind of thing. So, and the reason why Deborah backs off at having her is because she's scared. She's scared it could go away at any point, which it could, right? Because of the network and this is the way it goes. So we'll see like how her fear wins or doesn't win. Like those aspects of it, I think already set it up for being like a lot of nail biting, who's going to get egg on their face, who's going to like really not. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm nervous, but in a, like, an excited way. Yeah. I'm also interested to see the other characters, how Marcus's thing takes shape. Also like, the relationship between Deborah and her sister is sort of like, there were some steps forward to reconcile, but then there was some unraveling of that. And so that will be interesting. And then I'm most interested to see how the Fatty Arbuckle screenplay, like I think that, I don't think it'll take like up enormous time. I know. I just want more Christopher Lloyd. And I don't want to have to sit through a Back to the Future 10 to get it. I just want Christopher Lloyd on this show. Thank you. Because he is an eccentric character and it's such a very specific figure, historical comedy figure and everything, I feel like we have to sort of see the fruits of some of that. So I sort of wonder, and Jimmy he said he would produce it. And to our knowledge, we don't know that he's ever done that before. And so I feel like that has its own kind of, like funny complications of like, he's trying to manage these careers. He's trying to produce this movie. Like, Christopher Lloyd is probably a loose cannon of a, person on set, and like there's a lot there or whatever. So I do hope they sort of seed in at least a little of that, because I just think it would be so fun. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think their work is cut out for them in terms of Ava and Deborah, and like evolving right now to the next level. Now that they're both power brokers, sort of now what? And Ava does still have a very long career to think about. Not that Deborah doesn't, but Deborah is trying to set herself up for legacy, I think, right at this point. And to do that, it's late night, right? It's do that for time and then really kind of do whatever. And so, but Ava has her whole career now really in front of her. So I think the stakes are even higher for her. So, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how like these people feel like they're so real to us. They're our friends. Like, get so impassioned, but it speaks to the quality of the art, of this show, that you can get so fired up about them and care about them. And so I'm grateful that the show exists. I think it really shows why we need great television like this. And if anyone from Hacks Writers is listening, I will write for you for free. For free, or to be able to hang out with Christopher Lloyd. So it's really the I bet a lot of people listening are having the same feels.
Yeah, he's a national treasure. I do want to mention one thing, because I think you were mentioning something about, I think you can clearly see that Ava's going to want to make a statement. She's going to change the world with the show, and Deborah's going to just want to hold on tight. She doesn't want to lose what she has. And really what the whole show is about is like who has power and who's allowed to wield it, which now it sounds like I'm talking about the Acolyte, Star Wars The Acolyte, but I'm actually talking about Hacks,
Mm-hmm.
because when the show starts, Deborah has she has her long running show in Vegas, and she's being kicked to the curb because she's old and she's a has been, and that's kind of what is the impetus for all the stuff we've been talking about. Is she doesn't have the venue, she doesn't have any kind of, like, her power is only what people allow her to have, and late night is her like seizing something for herself, her own platform. And I think it is going to be interesting, because I think you're right. I think Ava's going to look at it as an opportunity to do something of substance, something like what Deborah did with the bribe, where she told the guy, gave him the 1.69 million. She's going to want those kinds of things, and Deborah's not. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for sure, because I think that is definitely one of the through lines of the show, is just who has power to do what they want to do, to say what they want to say. And it tends to not be the women. It's not Deborah. Deborah has her spots where she's able to wield her power, her influence, but a lot of times she's dancing to a tune that someone else is playing. So yeah, I think it's going to be, it could be set up to be the best season, which is crazy, because I think every season's been great.
I think so too. And I think just just like lastly on that too, I think it's a testament to show like how quickly the power shifts and changes between people. And it is worth noting that the network that she's going to be on is run by a woman. So
Yes.
I think that is important to point out, that ultimately she had to sign off on it, but Deborah still had to like jump through the hoops to campaign to get that. But now she has like this huge viewership and all this network, all these other network sort of levels. Like in that last episode, she goes into this meeting and they go around where they're like, so and so is head of Europe, so and so
Yes.
is, social media, this is LGBTQ social media person, and so she realizes like the machine that she's stepping
Yes.
into.
Yes.
I know, and that's like, you can tell Ava's not in that meeting, but you could tell she would just be like, my people, like all these great, visibility. So, um, so so it'll be, yeah, like it'll be also interesting to see how Deborah and Ava have to deal with
Mhm.
compromising vision and choices and different levers of the power, because now they're in a giant machine, and what that entails, and sort of, yeah, what are going to be the effects of that, whether, and I don't think we're going to see a clear cut of like, this is a disaster or this is a triumph. I think what we're going to get is a lot of that messiness that comes in that most of us are never going to know what that feels like. And I hope that the show is going to try and put us there. So, to understand, like, back to that conversation, that question of like, why can't we just get a woman behind this damn late night desk? Like, how hard is this? I hope season 4 shows us, or helps us get some clarity on that, of why it is so, in quotes, hard to have that. So, oh yeah, I'm excited. Hurry up, season 4. Hurry up.
I know. I hope it comes out 2025, but I don't know if that's the case. But fingers crossed that we won't have to wait as long as we did between seasons 2 and 3, because that felt like just painfully long. This feels like a good place to end, Sheila. Where can people find you? What would you like to plug?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Yeah, I am on Substack. I have a weekly place there. It's called Stay Curious, and it is like humorous commentary on some pop culture stuff, some sort of slice of life stuff. It's ever evolving little space there. But yeah, please lurk around in there, and also have a book coming out in a few weeks. It's called Boston and Beyond, discovering cities, harbors, and country charms. So fun, and it's combines my photography and my writing about different locations and places in Boston and the surrounding areas. So it's a little bit of a guide, and it's a little bit of a love letter to New England about some of our more hidden, less explored things. And so that'll be out August 15th, I believe. That comes out wherever books are sold. So yeah, and constantly working on just new stuff, as us creatives do. We're always working. We don't have QVC to fall back on, most of us.
Yeah, we don't have QVC money yet.
It's probably a good thing.
Definitely check out Sheila's Substack. She's a hilarious writer. You probably got a sense for her personality today. She takes beautiful pictures, and she mentioned she writes about pop culture. She told me just before this pod started that the post going up today is about WWF, and I'm excited to read it. I'm hoping Hulk Hogan will have a role in that newsletter, because as a child of the '80s, I was all about the Hulkamania, brother. Sheila, thank you for joining me. This was a blast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was great. I appreciate it. And everybody, yeah, check out or keep going with Eric's podcast and all of his Substack content, and anything that he's involved in is just fantastic. So don't miss out on all the fanfare, everything. It's amazing.
Thank you. I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, bye everybody.